have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roll with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
They look great in person, and I just can't wait till next year where we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was being ranked. I mean, how can you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast.
Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Donnelly. This is Tera Roberts, and this is the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast, episode 152, presented by the Fantasy Points Media Group. We are coming at you each and every week. We are talking starts and sits, Thursday night football preview. Sometimes we talk waivers, but today we are going to talk about players we are trading for and trading away because, let's be honest, Tera, what we have on the waivers, nobody wants anymore right now at this time of the season. I mean, it's been pretty bare. There's not a whole lot to talk about right now, but we are going to talk about some news and notes to kick off this show. We got two teams on by, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Los Angeles Chargers, and now we got to talk about the Cleveland Browns fielding offers for Kareem Hunt, and apparently the asking price happens to be a fourth-round selection. First off, as a fantasy manager, are you excited about the opportunity of Kareem Hunt possibly going somewhere else? And two, are you willing to pay, if you're a team in need of a running back, a fourth-round pick to get him?
As a fantasy manager, I am not excited. Kareem Hunt is someone who I have zero shares of, 0 shares in Dynasty, 0 shares in Redraft. So this will not benefit me in any way, shape, or form. And he would more than likely go to somewhere where maybe I had a player. So I'm not a big fan of this. Wish I had some Nick Chubb shares because obviously that would, his value will shoot through the roof. But it's interesting. I'm enjoying the trades, even if they don't benefit me. I'm not benefiting off of the James Robinson trade, but that's such a, fantastic thing to see, when we think about Travis Etienne, the opportunity he's getting, James Robinson going to an offense where maybe he can get some additional goal line touches. So trade season is fun. It's fun for us as fantasy managers, and then just as a fan of the NFL as well.
We are leading right up to that trade deadline there, and we have a lot of talk, a lot of rumors going around the NFL right now. This feels like something we should be getting excited about, but part of me is like, this is going to be a huge letdown come trade deadline. Maybe all the big pieces kind of move ahead of time. We're going to talk about some of these guys who have already moved a little bit later in these news and notes, but one guy that we're seeing moved right now from the Indianapolis Colts' starting lineup to their bench has been Matt Ryan in favor of slinging Sammy Ehlinger. And this sounds like a permanent move. How are we feeling about this for Michael Pittman, who is we love Michael Pittman on this show. And some people here actually prefer Paris Campbell, so this could affect them as well.
Yeah, actually, I dug into this because obviously, as you mentioned, I got a ton of Michael Pittman shares. And, you kind of diss the waivers, but in Superflex League, if you didn't go all in trying to get Sam Ehlinger, like, what were you really doing on this waiver wire? I know I put in one of my claims. I got him in Scott Fishbowl. I'm pretty excited to log in and see that. So we'll see. But so Ehlinger he's a mobile guy. So this is going to be good for the offense as a whole because it'll keep defenses honest. It will be good for Jonathan Taylor. I think it'll be fine for Michael Pittman and Paris Campbell because I was looking at the ADOTs and Michael Pittman Jr.'s ADOT is only 6.8. He hasn't really been sent deep downfield at all. It's kind of very odd, but this is the way that the Colts are utilizing him. And I don't think it's a Matt Ryan thing. I just think it's a strange, active organizational choice right now for this season. So Paris Campbell's ADOT's pretty low as well. And Alec Pierce is the one that is actually utilized the most as the deep threat in the offense. So I think that unfortunately he might be the one that suffers the most, considering that when you look at all of the benefits that Sam Ehlinger brings to the game, the only knock on him really, aside from some other minor things, was that the fact that he doesn't have fantastic arm strength. Now, maybe that's something that he's worked on and improved, but that was one of the issues with him in draft season when he was heading into the NFL, and his deep ball isn't fantastic. He can hit, he can miss, but I don't think it's going to be something that they rely on a lot. So Overall, I'm okay with this for Pittman. Okay with this for Paris Campbell. Worried about Alec Pierce.
I just love Frank Reich's response to this whole thing, basically telling Matt Ryan, it's not you, it's me. We did you wrong. We couldn't support you the way that we wanted to support you. So now we're going to discard you, basically is what they said to Matt Ryan. And we're going to go with the younger Sammy Ellinger. Now, we also had another quarterback change there. PJ Walker is going to start regardless of Sam Darnold, regardless of Baker Mayfield's health. Is this basically the new struggling for Stroud or yearning for Young? Is this the Panthers' way of low-key tanking for the season? Basically going, hey, you know what? Let's just roll with the XFL quarterbacks. We're seeing some backup quarterbacks have success so far this year in the NFL. Cooper Rush, Taylor Heineke here last week, perhaps Ellinger and PJ Walker.
Yeah, I didn't no PJ Walker for me. But yeah, I think it's just if you want to watch someone struggle out there, you would rather watch, I mean, just from Carolina's perspective, you would at least rather watch PJ Walker do it than watch Baker Mayfield do it because it looked pretty tragic when he was doing it. And we know what it looks like with Sam Darnold. So I understand why they're doing this. And I don't hate it that much because at least organizationally, we've seen that now with the exit of CMC, now they have to actually rely on DJ Moore. So maybe this is something that can get him going now that they can't aggressively say we're just tossing the ball to Christian McCaffrey. We did see some targets go the way to both Foreman and Chuba Hubbard, but not to the level of Christian McCaffrey. And we're not going to see that based off what we've seen in the past before in past years. So I don't mind this at all. It's interesting. Carolina is, clearly heading in the tanking direction. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, just a couple other ones here that we're talking about here as far as this NFL rumor mill is kind of been firing up. Your Packers are involved again. Not getting a first-round wide receiver, but maybe getting a first-round wide receiver 10, 15 years ago in A.J. Green. How are you feeling about the possibility of A.J. Green joining Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay?
Well, that would be stupid. What I saw was that they were interested and, gave a call in for Brandon Cooks, which would be far more exciting. Unfortunately, AJ Green's days are over. I think that Brandon Cooks' days are still here. He's just in a bad position in Houston. And if they let him out anywhere else, there's multiple teams calling on him where he can obviously transition to another team and have major impact. We've seen it time and time again with him. So I don't have a lot of faith that the Packers are going to do this because, they've had all the opportunity in the world to be able to do it and they've simply chosen not to. But the fact that they're at least calling on receivers is exciting to know that maybe that they'll actually make a move and get something done because that would have a massive impact on the entire offense that is in desperate need of somebody who can be a true wide receiver one. So I'm interested in it, not AJ Green. If it were Brandon Cooks, that would super pique my interest. So, I should have done Brandon Cooks as one of my trade for targets.
Well, the Packers are going to have to act quick on that because per Aaron Wilson there, the Kansas City Chiefs have also reached out towards Brandon Cooks there. Chiefs just need to back off. You've already blown it on a couple veteran wide receivers. You've got enough receivers. You've got enough pieces. Just knock it off right now. Again, you talk about how, Brandon Cooks could help get this Packers offense going there. Brandon Cooks could do the same to Kansas City as well. There's a lot of teams that could use themselves some Brandon Cooks. Now, speaking of another big move that we just saw, unfortunately for fantasy managers, unfortunately for fans of the NFL and the New York Jets, Breece Hall tore his ACL. He had a little bit of a meniscus injury in there as well. He is out for the season. Enter James Robinson. Now, as a Jets fan, you have to be excited about the fact that your Jets are actually going out there and making moves. They do believe that what they have here on this roster is good enough. They're 5-2. Let's give them a little bit of respect here. So adding James Robinson along with Michael Carter could be an interesting 1-2 punch. What's your initial reaction on that addition?
So don't start him this week. I know sometimes there's coach speak in terms of, we're going to ease him in, and that ends up not being the case. But I genuinely think that this is a pretty quick turnaround for him to be integrated into the Jets offense in any way that we would want to start him. So I would not be interested in him this week, but moving forward, I think it's pretty cool. I think the goal line opportunities will be there. We've seen the level of success that now James Robinson is not Breece Hall. That's a different level of, not to knock James Robinson or anything, but Breece Hall is a different kind of beast. So we're not going to get a near 1-for-1 production that we've seen with Breece Hall trending towards being an easy top 10 back and beyond that. So, but it's interesting because we know that the Jets have incredibly low pass volume, and I don't see that changing. I don't see, don't think that all of a sudden there's going to be just ample opportunity for Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore. They're still going to rely on the run. So, Robinson is an interesting stash, an interesting guy that, you've lucked out with, because the direction that it was heading for him in Jacksonville was not very pretty.
No, it wasn't. I mean, I love James Robinson. He's one of my guys there. I mean, I love everything that he's done. This is a good opportunity for first and second down work there in New York. Now, we've seen another trade go down today here on Wednesday in IDP world here. Robert Quinn leaving the Chicago Bears after a huge victory here just the other night. He is now heading to the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, are you kidding me right now with this Philadelphia Eagles team? Is there a better team in the NFL right now than the Philadelphia Eagles on both sides of the ball? I mean, you talk about that front line there. They basically got two starting lineups in that front four. That's how deep that Eagles front is. That is going to give some teams some problems there in the NFC East and in the NFC in general. And finally, fire sale in Denver is the rumor, as it turns out right now. If the Jaguars knock off the Broncos this week, Nathaniel Hackett, he could be on his way out. I mean, that's probably one of the worst kept secrets in the NFL right now. And Bradley Chubb is also rumored there for those IDP enthusiasts. Could be on his way out if the Broncos end up losing this contest in London to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, I don't know how they possibly lose when Russell Wilson's getting a pregame workout on the airplane, but hey, stranger things have happened apparently. Now, I got to ask this right now, because I'm sure you've flown quite a bit in your day. If someone started doing like lunges and high knees on the airplane, what is your original reaction going to be to that?
I'm starting to question whether or not Russ has lost his mind. The things that he's saying, he's got Wolverine blood. I'm warming up on the plane. I'm like, I don't know, man. I think he's overcompensating for everything that is going so negative around him. And I don't think it's working. Unfortunately, I don't see this heading in a positive direction. And it's really a shame because, I mean, the whole theory around why they got Russell Wilson made sense. That defense was a win now defense. That's a good defense. I mean, you don't want to start anybody that is going up against that Denver defense. And it's just a shame that the offense has completely blown it. The coaching has been awful. So yeah, the rumors of Jerry Jeudy heading out of town. Hey, go out and be successful literally anywhere else, because it's not happening in Denver.
I mean, if you want to start good players, you want to know who to start each and every week, you have to head to fantasypoints.com. Use promo code 22Vipers10. That'll get you 10% off that subscription, a one-stop shop for all your fantasy football needs. Now, we know right now that Russell Wilson is definitely the guy that once that plane lands in London is going to start clapping right there. He's definitely a clapper when the plane lands kind of guy. And I'm starting to question what is in those sandwiches that is making them so dangerous. Because there's got to be a little something in that sandwich that we don't know about right now. That's definitely not making him a winner heading into week number 8. But we will talk about our winners and losers from week number 7. And you're going to kick it off with a little bit of cheese and curds kind of flavor there with Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, this was a big win for Aaron Jones. Aaron Rodgers literally called his number last week, making a public declaration that Jones had to get the ball more. And we very much so learned that when Aaron Rodgers comes out and literally tells the organization publicly exactly what they need to do, they will fold and do it, to the tune of 9 receptions on 10 targets for 53 yards and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, the work on the ground was less than appealing, but you know what? It is what it is. I know Matt probably hates that, being that it's like PPR value, but he did get a couple of touchdowns. So, you can't knock him for that. But this was fantastic to see Aaron Jones finally get that target share that we expected, because he's a dynamic pass catcher. And it was so strange that in an offense where you have a plethora of unreliable pass catchers, you're avoiding the one outside of Lazard. I'm not knocking Lazard, but outside of that, you're avoiding the one that is literally shown to be incredibly reliable. So hopefully this can stick moving forward. Because he's got to have some increased role in that offense for them to be remotely productive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk about Aaron Jones a little bit later for a little bit of different reasons and altogether. So I got to know, you just talked about Aaron Rodgers coming out making that declaration towards Aaron Jones. Did he call out Romeo Doubs this week? I mean, it really feels like he called out Romeo Doubs without actually calling him out.
100%. He literally came out and basically said that everyone outside of Aaron, it wasn't just Romeo Doubs too. It was like everyone outside of Aaron Jones and Alan Lazard can kick rocks. He called them all out. Romeo Doubs, AJ Dillon, Sammy Watkins, even Robert Tonyan a little bit, which is, that's his boy too, but he didn't mention Robert Tonyan. So it was kind of funny how he literally said that only those two were the ones that were getting it done. So yeah, man. He publicly shamed everyone. It is kind of, I don't blame him. I don't blame him for that.
I mean, it's a bold strategy. We'll see if it pays off for him here in week number 8. Now, what about the losers from week number 7? What do you got for us there?
My loser was unfortunately Rondale Moore. And, it's not a surprise. Well, it's not a surprise when you look at what actually happened in the game. He should have been higher utilized. There's no reason that his production shouldn't have continued. For the past 2 games prior to this game, he had 13 receptions on 18 targets, and went to literally 1 reception on, I think, 2 targets in this game. And the entire reason was because DeAndre Hopkins came back. And it's not just that DeAndre Hopkins came back. It could have been fine with DeAndre Hopkins coming back. But the problem is that DeAndre Hopkins came back and played a lot in the slot, which meant that they put Rondale and Wandale. This is going to be like these 2 guys on my mind. I can't get their names right. Rondale Moore out there on the outside, 5'7". That does not make any logical sense. That's literally setting somebody up for failure. There's no way that he can be successful as an outside receiver. So he was my big loser this week, and it was not his fault. It was Cliff Kingsbury's fault. Hopefully they look at that and realize that just can't happen again. But unfortunately, maybe it does, because Arizona won. So maybe they say, hey, man, this is the direction we are heading.
Yeah, now just imagine if DeAndre Hopkins had Matt Ryan for his entire career, how good he could have been. Now, for me, I'm looking at my winners and losers, and it's hard for me not to kind of smile like a big, proud mama hen when I see Josh Jacobs doing what he has been doing the last 3 weeks. Now, listen, players since the merger with 3 straight 140-plus rushing yards and a touchdown in consecutive games. You got to go Josh Jacobs here in 2022, Derrick Henry 2019, Adrian Peterson 2012. See how far back we're already going now. Larry Johnson, 2005. Ricky Williams, 2002. Then you got to go back to Eric Dickerson, 84. O.J. Simpson in 76. Eric Dickerson did it again, in 83. That was the last time that we've seen someone with 3 touchdowns there and 36 fantasy points. What Josh Jacobs has done here in the last 3 weeks has been outstanding. He's literally winning you matchups for a guy who was found in the running back dead zone. So, you know what? He has got to be a winner each and every week until proven otherwise. I mean, right now, I don't know how you don't have him ranked inside your top 5. I mean, that's how good he's been so far at the running back position. And then my loser has kind of turned himself into a winner, so to speak, here as the days kind of progress here. My loser was James Robinson from week number 7, 1 target. That's it. No carries, no nothing. Trade this man to the Rams or the Jets already is literally what I have written down. And little do you know, he was traded to the Jets. So I kind of got my wish here, right? So really, he goes from a loser to a winner, as long as what I have written here actually pays out in the end, right? I mean, I think this is a good move for James Robinson. He wasn't getting used there. We know Travis Etienne basically took over that backfield a couple weeks ago. And there's still going to be questions about James Robinson and that Achilles injury. He came out strong week number 1, got some rushing touchdowns there early on in the season. And then it seems like he's hit that wall there. And we don't know if that's injury related or performance related as it is pertaining to Travis Etienne. So we'll see how this plays out here. Maybe not this week, like you said. I'm not starting James Robinson as he has to get into this offense and everything. But week 9, I mean, he could be one of those guys you plug and play going forward. Now, we got to talk about going forward here. We're going to talk about Thursday night football here real quick. We got ourselves what looks like on paper to be a great matchup. What looked to be a fantastic matchup way back in week number 1, before the NFL season kicked off, before Giselle left Tom Brady for Antonio Brown or whatever's going on in that circus there. I mean, hey, we are getting two first-place teams. It just happens to be one's 4-3 and the other's 3-4 because that NFC South is absolutely horrible. I mean, the Atlanta Falcons are tied with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for first place at 3-4, and making Arthur Smith look like a genius, even though he runs the ball 58% of the time, he's still coaching a first place team. So until that changes, who knows what's going to happen there in the South there with the Atlanta Falcons. Now, when we look at this, Tera, from a DFS standpoint, what are you looking for in this contest right now?
Yeah, as you mentioned, this is kind of a weird one because, first of all, both of these defenses are struggling, which is strange because, we knew Baltimore had, some issues, but Tampa Bay has typically been very stout defensively. So it's odd. Now, granted, they do have a lot of injuries going on, but unfortunately, both of them are just struggling. And then at the same time, we've got offenses that are usually full of high firepower, but they're struggling as well. So this is such a hard and odd game to assess. Tom Brady has had plus matchups multiple weeks in a row now, and there has been absolutely nothing to show for it. On top of that, if you're like me, maybe you've trusted him, especially in DFS. Now, season long is one thing. You probably moved on and got some decent streaming options, but in DFS, you might have trusted him multiple times and been burned. So is this the week that he pulls it off? I'm kind of leaning towards going with these two offenses rather than focusing on the defenses like we've typically been able to do in these Thursday night matchups. For me, Chris Godwin is the big target here. Again, he has been, he's underpriced under Mike Evans, but he has been the aggressive target hog. He's had 3 games out of the past 4 where he's had double-digit targets. He hasn't had any touchdowns, but again, we're looking for that offensive production to increase from Tom Brady and from the Tampa Bay offense as a whole. So I would, look for Chris Godwin to take advantage of this Baltimore defense. And I also obviously like Mark Andrews. You have to imagine that some of his lack of production last week might have been injury related, and hopefully he can heal up this week and get back to the Mark Andrews that we know and love. So, Chris Godwin and Mark Andrews are 2 guys that I like in the captain spot this week. So I'm leaning on, kind of going either, 2 directions here with the lineups. You can take it in the direction of going Andrews with Lamar Jackson, or you can take it in the direction of going Godwin with Tom Brady. And then whichever one that you don't put in the captain position, just put either Andrews or Godwin in there and pull in some value plays, because we've got some interesting value plays. We've got Justin Tucker, who is obviously a kicker that is always a fantastic option. Ryan Suckup is also interesting because he came off a very poor performance last week. With the Tampa Bay offense struggling as a whole, he just didn't see a lot of opportunities. So he could be a nice bounce back kicker candidate this week. We've also got Cade Otton. Cameron Brate is out, already been rolled out. So he's going to have that starting position, and he's been mildly productive with it. Very good value pricing as well. Rashad White is very interesting in terms of the potential upside that he can have in pass catching if this becomes a plus matchup for him to get some opportunities. I'm not interested in the defenses, as I mentioned. And Leonard Fournette's not a value play, but he's a good value for what his pricing is. So that is the direction that I would head with this Thursday night showdown.
Yeah, and if I was a betting man, I'm probably leaning towards the Buccaneers combination here more than anything, because I am very concerned about this Baltimore Ravens health. I mean, I'm going to be watching this injury report because guess who popped up again with a foot injury again on the injury report Monday and Tuesday? It was Rashad Bateman. We also know that Mark Andrews literally had more rushing yards than receiving yards in week number 7. And guess what? He only had 4 rushing yards. Now, you mentioned that knee injury. That eliminated him. He wasn't at practice on Wednesday. So now we're going into Thursday night football here. Limited week, short turnaround. If Andrews was hurt on Sunday and battling through that, he doesn't seem to be close to 100% going into this contest. So if you're looking at the rankings and you're seeing Mark Andrews listed at number 1, for me, that is kind of a concern because I don't think he finishes as the tight end 1 this week because I don't think he's 100% healthy. I don't think he's where he needs to be. And if Andrews isn't healthy and if Bateman's not healthy, then Lamar Jackson is going to continue to struggle like he has so far this season. He started out wonderful. First 3 weeks of the season, 12 touchdowns. These last 3 weeks he's played in, just 3 touchdowns combined. So we're seeing the tale of 2 halves, except we're not even halfway through the season. So I am very concerned about this Baltimore Ravens offense here. Now, who I'm not concerned about is Gus Edwards. Get that motor running. Head out on the highway. The Gus bus is fueled up and ready to go to run over this Tampa Bay Buccaneers run defense. Now, for me, hey, you know what? I'm a big-time Gus Edwards stan, so it's going to take a lot to bring me down no matter how you want. Bring me down, Gus. It doesn't matter because Gus Edwards, 2 touchdowns last week, 66 yards, and sadly, he was actually below his career rushing average there because he only ran for 4.1 yards per carry. So I'm all for Gus Edwards. He may be the only guy I feel comfortable with here in this Baltimore Ravens offense here this week. Now, on the flip side, you mentioned Tom Brady. He had averaged 312 yards per game last season. That number is down to 277 yards. He's got Chris Godwin. He's got himself Mike Evans. Mike Evans, you got to catch that, man. You've got to catch that. It literally felt that when he dropped that ball, what was that, like the 3rd play of the game? It felt like the game was over after that. It really did. That felt like it deflated everything, all the momentum, everything. We're only talking about the 3rd play of the game. And yet, Mike Evans still ended up with like 14 targets, 9 catches, 96 yards. I can't remember the exact numbers in front of me, but he still had a pretty good individual game there. But for Brady, he's got to find a way to get it right. I mean, he just hasn't been what we are accustomed to seeing. Is it the stuff off the field that's starting to affect his game on the field? I don't know. I don't want to say that. It's not my place to say it. But you look at these numbers right now, 3 and 4. You look at what he's been able to do. I mean, the guy's got a 698 career winning percentage here. I mean, at least since 2019. So he's not used to being 1 game below 500, especially at this point. I don't know what the factors are going into it and all this other stuff, but if you look at it right now, he's going to need to be able to protect this ball because this Ravens team does 2 things really well. It's picking off opposing quarterbacks, which they've done 8 times, and it's sacking opposing quarterbacks, which they've done 20 times, which happens to be the 5th most as far as sacks are concerned and the 3rd most as far as interceptions are concerned. So if he's going, there's a good chance that he's possibly going to turn over the ball. And the battle inside the battle for me is Chris Godwin out of the slot. We know that Mike Evans is going to be facing himself either Marcus Peters or Marlon Humphrey. I mean, these are good corners, good physical corners. It's going to be a fantastic matchup because you know Mike Evans, he's not going to shy away from the physical stuff there on the corner. Then you look at none of these guys, whether it's Peters or Humphrey, are going to come into the slot to cover Chris Godwin. It's not going to happen. Russell Gage, he's already been ruled out. Julio Jones is a game-time decision. Who's the next man up there? And is it Scotty Miller? He's the next guy up there for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? I don't know. Cole Beasley, he already retired after his 1 game with the Buccaneers. So Jalen Darden, I think he's still kicking around. But you look at it, I think it's Chris Godwin or bust. I agree with you 100% here. And like you said, Godwin or Brady is going to be my captain here. I'm probably leaning towards Godwin because I think there's going to be some turnovers, some sacks that are going to play into this factor when you look at it from a DFS standpoint. Now, that all being said, I've probably already talked too much about Thursday Night Football because we have all kinds of questions that came into our mailbag here this week, starting with probably one of the most controversial questions here that's just tearing at my heart. Do you trade Christian Kirk? See where I'm coming from already, Tera? I'm already talking about trading Christian Kirk for Miles Sanders. Which side would you rather have rest of season?
No, I'm okay with making that trade because again, so Christian Kirk is a top 20 wide receiver. That's a solidified fact for me. But I'm okay with the trade because he's a top 20 receiver that is probably your flex option. He's probably not your, just in theory of how you drafted. This guy is not your, unless you had, I don't know what multiple catastrophic injury situations you could have had, but this guy is probably not in your, even wide receiver 2 slot. So I'm okay with making this trade if you're struggling at running back.
And there's probably a lot of people out there that are struggling at running back because the running backs have been taking a hit again. It's that time of the year where running backs start going down. You can never have enough running backs on your roster. Is Travis Etienne a top 6 running back the rest of the season?
That's a little aggressive. I think he can be a low end RB1, high end RB2, but top 6 is a little much when you think about who that top 6 would be. Like who are you beating out? And who is falling beyond that. So I don't know. That's a little aggressive, but I think low end wide receiver 1 is within the realm of possibilities.
This next one looks like it's a trade just to make a trade. So who would you rather, Jalen Waddle or Amon-Ra St. Brown?
I mean, I would rather Jalen Waddle. I know, but because of the consistency at quarterback, because I do believe that Tua is a very consistent quarterback that is feeding both Hill and Waddle. And I don't have any worries about Waddle fading off, barring any injury concerns. That's not to say that I don't have the same issue, with Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's just that Jared Goff is a little up and a little down. So it just, it depends on a lot of things. So I'm more comfortable with Waddle. Although I do have to say, I got a little bit of a bone to pick, and I'll be super quick about it because I'll say it here because I can't respond to YouTube comments on some other situations. But the amount of people who have given me crap about believing that Jameson Williams is not going to have a major effect on the offensive firepower, on the offensive weapons for Detroit. Can we be very clear? We have zero reason to believe that he is going to come, that Jameson Williams is going to be coming in and making an impact in our regular fantasy season. Like, let's be very clear on that they've given us no timeline. Dan Campbell came out and said it's at least a month, and they're not winning at all. They have zero incentive to rush him back by any means. So stop knocking these Detroit offensive players on the possibility that Jameson Williams might be coming into play sometime down the line.
Yeah, you know what? I'm one of the biggest Jameson Williams stands out there. I loved him. He was my number 1 rookie wide receiver coming out of the draft. Love everything that he's able to do. I think he's a difference maker once that ball gets in his hand. But guess what? He can study the playbook all he wants right now, but getting into the game is a completely different situation there. Getting on with Jared Goff is another completely different situation. Getting into that whole chemistry type thing there. So yeah. Let's pump the brakes there a little bit on Jameson Williams. And I love myself some Jameson Williams, but I'm more looking at 2023 more than 2022 in that situation. For me, this comes down to I'm kind of thinking about hedging my bet here. If you're looking for the guy who's going to score more points the rest of the season on a points per game basis, I may lean to Amon-Ra St. Brown. That said, I think Jalen Waddle is going to be the guy who scores more points, period, because he's going to be able to be healthy that entire stretch. Because Jalen Waddle, hey, we just saw him take a shoulder injury there that sidelined T. Higgins last season, but the guy came back and he was ready to play the next week. Meanwhile, Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's already missed time there. He's already had a NFL safeties protocol buzz down, kind of eliminated him last week, which actually was a buzz kill for fantasy managers. I mean, if we think we know what's going on these days, we have no clue. Let's be honest. Now, rank the following running backs: Devin Singletary, Gus Edwards, Michael Carter, Brian Robinson, Darrell Henderson. Who are your favorite, let's say 2 or 3 out of that group?
The one with the most upside is Devin Singletary, honestly. And it's the fact that we know exactly when we can predict. Let me not go on too much about this because I know I'm talking too much, but we can predict when Devin Singletary is going to go off. So Devin Singletary, then I would say Brian Robinson, Devin Singletary, Brian Robinson, Gus Edwards, Michael Carter, Darrell Henderson. It's very close between Edwards and Brian Robinson. They're very, very similar guys, to be honest.
Yeah, and for me, I think we agree with Carter and Henderson where they're at. I'm not getting in on that Henderson train here. The first 3, if I'm being honest, I think I have Singletary as that number 3, but I think we're on the same wavelength where we know when we can predict where Singletary is going to be based on how we feel that the Bills are going to perform that game. If the Bills are going to blow a team out, we don't want any part of Devin Singletary because he's not going to get used. If we feel the game's going to be close, then we think that Devin Singletary is going to have a workhorse type game. I mean, it's pretty easy to predict. It's like predicting a Jared Goff game. If Jared Goff is going to face pressure, fade him. Get him out of your lineup. Same with Matthew Stafford. If there's pressure, get out of there. Now, so we know what to do with Devin Singletary. I think Gus Edwards and Brian Robinson have better week-to-week value because I don't think that game script is going to affect him as much moving forward. I'll give the slight edge to Gus Edwards here over Robinson, followed by Singletary. That said, if I know the matchup ahead of time is, Singletary would obviously jump ahead of the other two. So I think we're kind of in agreement there as far as Devin Singletary is concerned. Now, this was an interesting one too because here's three receivers that most people had likely in their top 15 at the beginning of the season. Need one of these guys, Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin, or DJ Moore this week.
Deontay. It's not the best matchup in the world, obviously, for him against Philadelphia, but he still is seeing a good target share in that offense. And, in theory, they're going to have to push high volume to keep up with Philadelphia. Or this could be, granted, this could be a, competitive rivalry kind of situation where it's a little bit lower scoring, but I don't think Deontay Johnson is phased out of this game in any way, shape, or form. So it's Deontay for me.
And I'm going to go with DJ Moore here against the Falcons because the Falcons are the Raiders of the wide receiver position, really. That's basically where they've come to the season. They're giving up more fantasy points per game than any other team right now. We'll get into this a little bit deeper on these starts and sits because I do have McLaurin and I do have Deontay Johnson kind of written up a little bit as we get into that. So, and finally, another trade, one QB league. The team that's trading for a quarterback, their current quarterbacks are Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, and Sam Ehlinger. Would you trade Travis Etienne to acquire James Cook and Joe Burrow? So forget about the James Cook thing there. Would you trade Travis Etienne for Joe Burrow if you obviously need a quarterback?
It's Joe Burrow, and he's been producing at an insanely high level, but we just talked about the potential upside for Travis Etienne. I don't know if I would do this because I would want to know what else is on waivers because I'm wondering if you're maybe just rostering the wrong guys. Winston is there. At this point we know that Winston is, he's lost his job. I don't think he's someone that you should be rostering. I wonder how deep the league is and if maybe there are some better options on waivers and you can just, kind of stream matchups if you get a little bit more effective with it. There should be some guys out there that provide a little bit of upside. Daniel Jones, Taylor Heineke, matchup dependent guys that can give you a little something.
Well, I think this is one of those 14-team leagues, so the selections may be a little bit tougher there to come by. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. If you're a competing team, and if you can move a running back, I think you make this move. I mean, this means ETN would have to be your RB2 currently with a very solid RB3 kind of already in tow. I mean, you have to be comfortable with your RB3 to give you RB2 production to be able to make this move, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Speaking of trades, we're going to talk about some players that we're willing to trade for and a couple of players that we're willing to trade away here. Tera, can you pronounce this person's name right this time? And who are you trading for?
Nope, I will probably mess it up. No, Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm a true believer that if Wan'Dale Robinson can stay healthy, he will be the wide receiver one of, this Giants team. And I know that people say, do you really want the wide receiver one of the Giants team? Daniel Jones has been very consistent. And the targets that Wan'Dale Robinson have seen, that's been very good. I like Darius Slayton. I just don't believe he can be a consistent target hog. Robinson is very dynamic. He's explosive. He gets open at will. So there's so much opportunity for him in this offense as he moves forward. I want a piece of that. I like where this could head if he stays healthy, which is difficult for Giants wide receivers. But if it happens, it can be good.
Well, it's funny you kind of mentioned it's like we're throwing out the scarlet letter when we talk about the Giants wide receivers. Meanwhile, their RB2, Daniel Jones, is outproducing certain teams like, Pittsburgh's RB1. So I'd rather have the RB2 in New York right now than I would the RB1 in Pittsburgh. So let's get this Giants offense a little bit of a break here. They are 6-1 after all. Now, who is that player that you are trading away?
I'm trading away Darrell Henderson, and honestly, I don't know if you can get a ton for him, but you could flip him for a low end wide receiver, like maybe a Wandale Robinson, someone's didn't have a lot invested into and is willing to let go for the possibility that Henderson can give you that kind of production that you saw last year. My only fear for him is that Kyron Williams coming in he's not a 3-down guy. This is not he's going to take over the backfield and Henderson's going to disappear. But I get worried that if he takes enough of that pass catching work, because he is a 3rd down back, he's a smaller guy and he's good with his hands. If he takes that, it's going to really knock the value and the upside of Darrell Henderson. So that's the only reason why I would kind of get out of this before we actually see Williams come in and utilized on 3rd down.
And for me, I'm buying Amon-Ra St. Brown right now. The price tag to add St. Brown will never be as low as it is today. We're talking about he's missed some time there with the concussion then, and then the new concussion / safety protocols. The Lions' schedule for receivers in fantasy football, it gets really easy this next month or so, starting with Miami Dolphins here this weekend, who could be without their actual starting slot receiver. So you can plug in St. Brown right now there in what is expected to be a shootout. Now, some other buys include Josh Jacobs. Hey, I'm willing to pay whatever anyone wants to get him right now. I don't see him slowing down. Devin Singletary, we talked about that workload in those close games for the Bills. As the season goes on, I think the games are going to get a little bit tighter, a little bit closer, meaning the Bills need to rely on Singletary a little more. Rachaad White, hey, if things continue to go bad for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they may want to take a closer look at what White can do, and you can never have as many running backs on your lineup as you have right now, right? The more running backs you have, the better. And, of course, Hill, Waddle, whatever it is takes to cost to get these guys, you pay that price right now. Tyreek Hill, he is going to end up as the wide receiver 1 at the end of the season. As far as yardage is concerned, for sure, certainly that's going to be it. I don't know if the receptions are going to be there to kind of push him over Cooper Kupp, but I mean, the numbers aren't going to lie. Jalen Waddle, same situation there. Cortland Sutton, Chris Godwin. We mentioned him a little bit earlier, and he just had ACL surgery back in January, early January. He has just hit that 9-month period right now. November is going to be month number 10. That is typically when you recover from an ACL as a wide receiver. I mean, that's when you start to make a little bit better. So right now is the time to buy. Before Thursday Night Football, before this game even kicks off tomorrow, you need to, or today, or whenever you're watching this, before the Buccaneers take on the Ravens, you need to go out there and get yourself some Chris Godwin. Jonathan Taylor, another guy underperforming. Rashad Bateman, take advantage of it. The dip right now with the foot injury. Keenan Allen, and of course, you mentioned the man himself, Wandale Robinson. I'm going to talk about him on the Friday Night Hype Show because I'm all with you. I'm seeing this guy run 70% plus routes here, 30% target share per route run. I mean, he's getting the targets when he runs the routes, and he's starting to run the routes, so they're going to be there. Selling right now, I've been all about selling Ezekiel Elliott for as long as possible. And I may have already lost my opportunity now, as it looks like he's going to miss this week with that knee injury. But prior to that knee injury, look, back-to-back weeks of a split backfield in Dallas. This is something we have not typically seen. It's typically been whenever Ezekiel wants the ball, Ezekiel going to get the ball. But Tony Pollard there, he has outsnapped Zeke 65% to 49% essentially there, running routes on 50% of the dropbacks. Elliott, he doesn't get targets. He hasn't been targeted in the passing game. Now, some other sells for me include Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, because Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, I'm not going to be able to tell which one's going to get the numbers here any given week. I mean, it's going to be tough to figure that out. Leonard Fournette's another guy I'm selling. And DJ Moore after this week, I'm looking to sell. I'm looking to sell on DJ Moore after 2 solid weeks. We had a good week of DJ Moore last week. We get the Falcons this week. This may be the time to capitalize on that opportunity. Now, we know we're going to talk about DJ Moore a little bit later in my starts and sits. I've already told you about I'd rather have him over a couple other players here. But tell us, Tera, who would you want to start here at the quarterback position in week number 8?
Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones. I'm going to talk about him again because I do like him. Seattle has allowed the 10th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks, and that includes the infamous game where Detroit absolutely went off and Jared Goff threw for nearly 400 yards and 4 interceptions, or 4 touchdowns. Daniel Jones had 19 completions on 30 attempts for over 200 yards and a touchdown through the air last week, and then 11 carries for, as you mentioned, our running quarterback of the year, Daniel Jones, over 100 yards and a touchdown on the ground. I feel like people laughed at me a lot. It might have been Major. Can I say it was Major since he's not here? Pretty sure
Absolutely.
he laughed every time I said Daniel Jones is a running quarterback. Who's laughing now? He is a running quarterback. He has wheels, gives him a solid floor, fantastic upside. Loving Daniel Jones.
And it's that time again. It's a new week, but the sit still stays the same. Who you
Yes, it
got
does.
for us?
It's Matt Stafford. It's always Matt Stafford. Sit him. As bad as it has been for Matt Stafford, this is going to be a bad situation again against San Francisco, who, they struggled last week against Carolina. But again, they were dealing with injuries. Hopefully, they've, got a little bit healthier this week, and it is a division matchup. So it's going to be a dogfight. We know that this is not going to be something that's going to be an offensive firepower situation. It's going to be two defenses struggling, trying to desperately claw their way to a win. So I'm not interested in Matt Stafford this week at all.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I talked about it already. Stafford, when he gets pressured, he has struggled this year. And San Francisco, they can bring the pressure without necessarily bringing the blitz. So look out there, Matthew Stafford. I'd be pivoting away from him at all costs. For me, Tua Tagovailoa versus Detroit. You have to start Tyreek Hill. You have to start Jalen Waddle. So you have to start Tua Tagovailoa against this Lions secondary. That's going to be clearly outmatched on the field. And we just saw Tagovailoa get a little bit of that rust off there last week. The Lions are allowing the fourth most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks at 20.8. And in the last 3 games in which Tua started and finished the contest, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle have combined for 686 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now, I'm going to give you another start here just because Major's not here. So I feel like, hey, you know what? I got a little extra airtime. How about Kirk Cousins against the Cardinals? The Cardinals, they like to run cover 3, and Kirk Cousins averages the second most points amongst quarterbacks per drop back against cover 3. So feel confident starting Kirk Cousins this week. Now, I am sitting Dak Prescott versus Chicago. I'm still not convinced that Dak is back. Let's be honest. Last week against the Lions, I just told you why I'm starting Tagovailoa. Meanwhile, the Lions, Dak Prescott could not get it going. He managed just 207 yards. And yeah, he was 19 of 25. The completions were there, but 207 yards with his longest pass being of 24 yards to CeeDee Lamb. That's just not cutting it for me. This week, the Cowboys, they face that Bears defense that has played the pass tough this season, allowing the 8th fewest fantasy points per game and have allowed the 4th fewest yards this season at 1,318. Sure, Robert Quinn, he's gone right now, but there may be a bit of a fire on some of these other Bears back ends here, so to speak, to kind of get them a little bit after Dak Prescott. Like I said, I'm not convinced that Dak is back. So another guy I'm sitting this week for the same reason there, pressure. So Matthew Stafford, you mentioned him, but how about Justin Fields coming off his best game in quite some time? Now he gets as a reward the Dallas Cowboys, who lead the league in sacks with 29. Justin Fields has been sacked himself 27 times in just 7 contests. Now, turning our attention to the running back position, Tera, what do you got for us?
You talked about this one, really. I am starting Tony Pollard versus Chicago. Very simple here. It's related to Zeke. One, if he's injured, it's the easiest start that you will have all week, as he's looked fantastic. And even if he doesn't sit, and even if Zeke is a little bit involved, you mentioned that there was a little bit of a shift last week. And I think it could continue. And it's a fantastic matchup for him. Last week, Pollard had 12 carries, 83 yards. This is a good trending direction for him. I was very comfortable starting both Zeke and Pollard last week, and I am comfortable starting Pollard this week, even if Zeke is playing. And then my sit is going to be David Montgomery against Dallas. So I guess I'm just kind of flipping it here and doing the reverse. David Montgomery, unfortunately, while I like him, he's trending in the wrong direction because of the onslaught that Khalil Herbert is having in terms of stepping up and taking a lot of that opportunity. So unfortunately, it's a bad matchup against Dallas, and that's strike number 1. Strike number 2, the appearance of Khalil Herbert. I'm just out, and I'm not going to play him this week.
Yeah, that Dallas defense, they are allowing the 2nd fewest fantasy points per game to the running back position. That's a strong fade. Now, for me, who I'm getting behind this week, and I think we need to all get behind him, how about Raheem Mostert there against the Detroit Lions? Detroit has allowed the third most fantasy points per game to the running back position, allowing on average 29.17 fantasy points. Over the last 3 contests, Mostert has 8 runs of more than 10 yards, which is the 4th most in the league over that period of time. Yeah, you heard me right. Mostert, he's a big play waiting to happen. This week, he faces a Lions defense that allows, on average, 5 rushes of more than 10 yards per contest. You got a guy who could run for 10 yards per run. You got a team that's giving up 10 yards per run. I mean, it's not a good combination if you're a Detroit Lions fan, but it's great if you're a Raheem Mostert manager here. Get ready to do the Mostert mash this week in Detroit. Now, for me, I'm sitting, Tera, please forgive me right now. I am sitting Aaron Jones. I have to. It's bad enough when a running back is facing the Buffalo Bills, a team that doesn't even allow you to run the ball. The Bills, it's because they usually flip that script to where a team has to pass just to stay into the game, which you're like, hey, that's no problem. Aaron Jones, he's a pass-catching back. He can get things done in the passing game. But the Bills, well, they also have been holding opposing backs to the 7th fewest receiving yards this season, having allowed only 177 per game so far, 177 throughout these 7-game stretch so far. And do we really trust anything going on in Green Bay anymore? Like, can you really trust this backfield? One week we thought it's going to be Aaron Jones, and they decided to just let A.J. Dillon do his thing. Last week, squeaky wheel kind of got the grease. Aaron Jones got it. Maybe this is an A.J. Dillon type week. I don't know. I have trust issues. It's because of things like this. Now, a couple other starts and sits for me at the running back position. Obviously, start Kenneth Walker. The New York Giants, they rank last in yards before contact per attempt. And Kenneth Walker, you don't care if you contact him because he's going to break that tackle. 17 missed tackles forced in the last 3 weeks. We talked about Miles Sanders a little bit earlier there. The Eagles, they keep on getting better. They added Robert Quinn. With the better that defense gets, that means the more they're going to be able to run the ball a little bit later in the game. And we know Miles Sanders, he's getting about 20. Let me back this up a little bit here. Pittsburgh has allowed 3 backs this season to produce more than 20 fantasy points and 6 backs to produce more than 15. I'm feeling pretty good about Miles Sanders this week. And on my sit side there again, Najee Harris. Listen, when you're getting outran by Daniel Jones, that's strike 1. Strike 2 comes against playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who have allowed the 15th fewest fantasy points to running backs. However, they're allowing the 3rd fewest against running backs at home in Philadelphia, and this game is in Philadelphia. Sorry, Najee, you got to sit. Now, Tera, going back to the wide receiver position, who do you got starting and sitting for us here in week number 8?
I'm starting Wan'Dale Robinson. I don't have to explain it. We talked about it earlier. And then, hey, go ahead and complete the stack. Daniel Jones and Wan'Dale Robinson for Max Giants Euphoria. My sit of the week is it's Michael Gallup. Unfortunately, I think this is kind of a done situation. And let me explain why it's a done situation. Since his first game back from injury, he's failed to reach double-digit fantasy points. Period. Like he's just not doing it. And to make matters worse, we were hoping, return of Dak, increase in offense, good rapport. Nope. Gallup had 0 receptions on 2 targets. And to make matters worse, this is clearly not just the Dallas offense being ineffective or anything on Dak's part. Noah Brown has outsnapped Gallup significantly over the past 4 weeks. This is a very odd situation where it just doesn't feel like he's the second option in that offense. And it's not that Noah Brown is doing particularly well, but his presence, his dominating presence on that field in terms of the actual times that he's on the field, the routes that he's running compared to Michael Gallup, it's just limiting his opportunities. On top of that, you got the tight end situation where it's no longer just Dalton Schultz. They're integrating, which makes me a little bit concerned with Dalton Schultz, but that's another story. But they're integrating in these 2nd and 3rd string tight ends that are out there getting targets, running routes, having a decent amount of snap count. Overall, there are multiple tight ends out there on the field at the same time. I just don't think this is heading a good direction for Michael Gallup. I would 100% sit him this week.
Yeah, Michael Gallup is in a very similar situation as what Chris Godwin was featuring here not too long ago, because he himself is coming back from an ACL, and he may not be quite ready to come back right now. I mean, it's going to take time to get back into the flow of the game and whatnot. So for me, Michael Gallup is going to be a fade. Now, for me, starting, sitting, whatever you want to look at it, on my start side, it's DJ Moore. I just kind of talked about it. I may be chasing points here, or perhaps I'm just overly excited that DJ Moore finally found the end zone last week against the Buccaneers. But he also had 10 targets. He caught 7 of them. He had 69 yards. And now he's facing that Falcons secondary that has allowed the most receiving touchdowns this season with 11 and the second most receiving yards to receivers at 1,455. They've also surrendered the most fantasy points per contest there at 46.46. So I feel pretty good about DJ Moore. If there's a week that he's going to go off, this is the week. Now, I also really like Devontae Smith there. He's been just as good as A.J. Brown has been since week number 2, and he's put at least 15 or more fantasy points in each of his last 4 contests. Gabriel Davis versus the Green Bay Packers. Listen, Josh Allen, he don't care how good you are against wide receivers. He doesn't care if you're running cover 2. He's still going to throw the ball deep. It doesn't matter to Josh Allen. So if it doesn't matter to Josh Allen, it doesn't matter to me. I'm starting Gabriel Davis no matter what. Now, my sit side here, Amari Cooper versus Cincinnati. The Bengals defense has surrendered the 7th fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers at 28.08, which happens to be the 5th fewest. And they're also allowing, so we know they're good when it comes to defending the wide receiver position there. Now, I do like Amari Cooper. I just don't like him this week. Now, with Brissett as his quarterback, he's literally the wide receiver 11 so far this season, on pace for 1,000 yards, on pace for 80 receptions, and he might even hit 10 touchdowns. Except this matchup right now is not a good matchup for him, especially with Donovan Peoples-Jones opposite of him, not taking much attention away. Now, we did talk about Terry McLaurin, and we did talk about Deontay Johnson earlier, and why I don't like him. Well, Deontay Johnson, one way or the other, he's going to get James Bradbury or Darius Slay this week, and I don't like that matchup no matter how you want to shuffle it there. Second, I don't think there's going to be any time for Kenny Pickett to throw the ball. I mean, we mentioned this off this defensive line for Philadelphia. When they're bringing Robert Quinn as a second-string defensive end off the bench, that's not good for opposing quarterbacks. I mean, that is literally fuel for nightmares. And then on the other side, the Philadelphia Eagles, they have allowed 3 touchdowns and the 5th fewest points to opposing perimeter receivers this year. And then Terry McLaurin, listen, the Indianapolis Colts, they're as good as any team in the league right now when it comes to defending wide receivers for fantasy purposes. They've allowed just 745 yards this season, which is by far the lowest in the league. And they have given up just 4 touchdowns, which is the 8th fewest in the league. If you're looking for production, it may not happen this week for Terry McLaurin, even with Taylor Heineke under center. Now, Tera, let's close it off with your favorite position, the tight end position. What do you got for us?
Evan Ingram. He has been a very solid streaming option recently, and good for him, man. He's doing a little bit of a turnaround here. Check out the stats. He is since week 5, his stats have been 6 receptions on 10 targets, 5 receptions on 6 targets, 4 receptions on 7 targets. It's been really good for him. He's hovering around that, double-digit fantasy points that makes you a tight end 1 because of the tight end 1 wasteland position. So, in a pretty solid one as well. And the matchup against Denver, we've talked about Denver. It's obviously an extremely tough defensive matchup. But if there's one area that Denver has been vulnerable against, it has been the tight end position. So I like Evan Ingram this week. The guy that I don't like and that I'll be willing to sit, talked about him a little bit, is Dalton Schultz. And again, it's not a knock to him. First of all, he's got this nagging. I think people need to kind of acknowledge that he's got this nagging knee injury. And it bothers him. It, kind of flares up during the game. It took him out a little bit. He came back. So, no big deal. But that kind of makes it so you wonder if his usage is going to be a little bit limited. We're seeing those other tight ends that filled in while he was out with his injury step in and, look pretty decent while doing it. Visibly, Jake Ferguson has looked good on the opportunities that he's had. So they're integrating them in just enough to grab a few targets that kind of make it difficult for you to have upside. So he can have a decent floor, but I just don't feel like he has that upside opportunity, especially when they're willing to throw touchdowns to these other tight ends. They're not just in there, for the sake of being in there or blocking. So Chicago has been a tough defensive matchup for tight ends. So I am unfortunately out on Dalton Schultz this week.
Shout out Peyton Hendershot and Jake Ferguson. Now for me, I'm going to turn my attention to another favorite of ours. I'm going to try to get the hype train going one more time for Irv Smith Jr. against the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals have allowed 63 receptions to tight ends this season, which is the most in the league. They've allowed 539 yards to tight ends, which is the second most in the league. They've allowed 6 touchdowns to tight ends in 7 weeks, which is the most in the league. If there is a week for Irv Smith to get it right, it is this week. The Cardinals, I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about Kirk Cousins, they run cover 3 more than any other team. And Irv Smith has an opportunity to sit there underneath and have himself a very good day. A couple other tight ends to keep in mind this week. Tyler Higbee. Normally, I wouldn't suggest starting anyone against the San Francisco 49ers. But the last time that he did, he put 17.3 fantasy points up on him in week number 4. Travis Kelce and Kyle Pitts have also had double-digit points against the 49ers this season. Pat Freiermuth there against Philadelphia. He has seen 7 or more targets in 4 of his last 6 contests. Volume has been there for the Pittsburgh Steelers tight end. And on my sit, hey, Kyle Pitts is a sit every week until he proves me otherwise. Arthur Smith is sitting him. You should too. And finally, let's wrap this up here real quick. We missed this at the top of the show. Just so that you are aware of everything going on, Breece Hall out for the season, ACL. Mike Williams, he looks like he's out for the next 4 weeks with that high ankle sprain. Keep an eye on Amon-Ra St. Brown and his safety protocol type injury there. Ezekiel Elliott took a knee to the helmet there. He's looking like he's out this week with a knee injury. DK Metcalf, patella tendon, x-rays were negative. Not as bad as we originally thought. He could be in the lineup, but obviously a situation worth monitoring. Corey Davis, MCL sprain. Alan Lazard had a bit of a shoulder injury there. Jamar Chase, hip flexor. Nico Collins, groin. David Njoku, a big one here. He is going to be out for the next 2 to 5 weeks. The Browns play this week. They got a bye next week. Maybe we see him in 3 weeks, but I expect him out a little bit longer there. Rest easy, sweet prince. Dalton Schultz, look, he's at a high risk of re-aggravation, that PCL there every single time, unless he decides to rest it for the next 3 to 4 weeks, which I don't think is in his DNA. Daniel Bellinger there. We talk about this New York Giants team. He basically fractured his eye socket there. How that happens when you're wearing, I don't know how this even happens. He's out for a little bit of time there. Ryan Tannehill, he had that ankle injury. He returned into the game. So if you're hoping for Malik Willis, you may have to wait a little bit longer. And if you're waiting for Major Caldwell, you're going to have to wait until Sunday when you see him on the Fantasy Points Network there, where they drop their Sunday morning show with him and Nick Script. And you can catch Tera here doing all things fantasy, TikTok, whatever, with Fantasy Pros, with Fantasy Alarm, amongst some many other publications out there. Catch myself here, right here on the Vipers Network with my Thursday Night Football preview. That's already out. And then, of course, on Fantasy Points on Friday, we have the Friday Night Hype Show coming at you. And I got about 4 games I'm going to look at previewing. And we've talked a little bit about the Giants. Well, them and the Seahawks, that's kind of a big deal this week. And I'm excited for that game. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in depth here this week. With that all being said, for Tera, for Major, I'm Matt Donnelly. And this has been the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast presented by the Fantasy Points Media Group. And we will see you next week.